Welcome back to Nakamoto 101, where we're breaking down the Bitcoin Whitepaper into tiny little chunks. Today we are dealing with section 11, calculations, and I must admit that this is the section I've been fearing this whole time, and the sole section that I can't claim to rightfully understand overall, word for word, or rather symbol and mathematical sphere for sphere. But we're here tonight to fix that with Doge, even if it takes multiple takes. So, first here, Satoshi sets the scene, and this is a very important section because we're putting together all of the pieces we've looked at so far, and we're modeling, okay, what if someone does try to attack this system? So, after specking out this permissionless, transparent money system with its unique checks and balances, attacker's still gonna attack. Like, that's what happens. So what does that look like? We're going to break down this first section, and the key point being presented here, an attacker can only try to change one of his own transactions to take back money he recently spent. So this is something that a lot of people don't understand at first with Bitcoin. Can you go into some detail?
So because of the way key pairs work in Bitcoin, all transactions can only be sent by the person who owns them because they need to sign with their key that controls the coins. So what this means is all that an attacker could do if they got control of the network, and what is commonly called a 51% attack, is they could exclude previous transactions. So they could make a transaction and then receive goods or services for it, probably goods, but it's really hard to do this because you have to receive something. So usually you'd receive another coin, like another crypto coin, and then you'd release your chain that had the different transaction set in it that had more proof of work behind it, and on that chain you'd include a different transaction instead. So you'd say, hey, I'm paying you for this, and then as soon as you turned around you'd say, actually I'm sending the money to myself. And then when
Dark magic.
And the costs behind this are absolutely astronomical because of how big the Bitcoin network is in relation to mining. And it's really,
So thing one, you can only double spend with your own transactions. You can't just magically change around the network. You do have dark magic if you succeed in a 51% attack, but it's very limited in scope. So from there, this is where some of the specific design decisions too, like blocks every 10 minutes or so, are really proven to be a feature, not a bug. Because particularly when we're looking at people trying to game this system, it's just plodding along. So in addition to all these resource costs and stuff like that, it's also logistically quite challenging to get anything through. And it's like this really strongly stacked, layered system of confirmed truths, and it gets harder to alter truths that are, more verified lower down on the ledger. Now, Satoshi shifts into talking about the gambler's ruin problem, such a poetic name here. And the direct quote kicking this off is, suppose a gambler with unlimited credit starts at a deficit and plays potentially an infinite number of trials to try to reach break even. Doge, can you break down the gambler's ruin problem that is the next page and a half of this?
So the gambler's ruin, and what that just refers to is, like you said, if you have unlimited money, how long would it take you to get back to zero, right? So it's not really a real scenario that's going to happen. Usually when people eventually lose enough, they have to stop gambling. But if someone had infinite money, depending on the odds of them, winning, how long would it take them to get back to zero? So in this first equation, he's just comparing the probability of an attacker finding the next block to the probability of an honest node finding the next block. And what you'll see is, as long as there's more honest nodes, as soon as the attacker falls behind one or two blocks, it's near impossible for them to ever catch up. And now as he goes on to the next example, it's about how long someone would have to wait before they were sure their transaction was safe and it couldn't be taken back. And one interesting thing about Bitcoin is that the larger the transaction, technically you should be waiting longer. This won't affect anyone you'll probably ever meet. It's a very high number that it would actually matter. But when you see these really large transactions on the blockchain that everyone's like, oh wow, look how much money moved at once. Sometimes you could objectively say they're not safe for like a whole week.
Now we get into the full page of solid maths. As Doge has contextualized for me, page 7 of the white paper, the first full 3 paragraphs, and the math and code that follow it, are basically a practical example of what is set up on page 6. So if you can kind of show how we run the results in this section.
Yeah, so it's something that a lot of people notice is there's not a lot of numbers or equations actually in the white paper. It's mostly just solid, concise, dense information. Just that this is how it works and this is why we think it will work. But he does kind of sneak in this page full of numbers at the end, right after dropping some equations with symbols that I'll be honest, I don't know how to do that full equation there. It's a little out of my range. But what I can say is that it's not as complicated as it looks once you start to understand what this page of numbers means. So the main thing you're going to want to take note of is Z is the number of blocks, right? So in the top chart we're showing with just 0 to 10, and then down here we're counting by 5, so we're covering a larger range. And what we're trying to determine is the odds of someone catching up or an attacker catching up. And what you'll always see is it drops off faster and faster, so it's just exponentially decreasing. And what he's trying to show here without, he kept the equations off this page, this is just the results. He's showing that with one block, 20%, 5%, or 1.3%, 0.3%, 0.09%. So what he's saying is, with only a few blocks behind, it gets exponentially harder. And all you're seeing is, this only counts by ones, and this just became, hundreds of, maybe a few thousand times smaller of a number. And as you can see for the bottom, it's the same idea, but this time we're showing what happens if you were 50 blocks behind, and you even with more power. So this is representing their chance. So if they had that much power, they would still, it's almost equal. When you're 50 blocks behind, you're never going to catch up. That's mathematically impossible. So it's not really about the fancy equations. It's just showing that on a small scale of 1 to 10, this drops by tens to thousands.
Well, thank you for explaining Satoshi's code and math to us to the best of your ability. And thanks very much for joining us, and see you next time.